So, welcome back to the Unreasonables. This is Local by himself. Sorry, I've got a cold, but it's been a year, almost like 13 months, I think, since we last released something on the channel. Pretty much every host had a big change in their life, especially me starting college, so we take a break. And we thought it was going to be permanent, but we wanted to come back and bring this back, so we decided to. Uh, I'm currently a freshman political science and pre-law student at a university that I will not name because it may bring me up for libel and defamation problems, so I'm not going to. Um, and yes, I am still an ANCAP, but I've matured in this idea. I used to be ANCAPistan or bust, but now I'm a freedom bus ANCAP. I'm participation in democracy is not inherently a bad thing, and we can use the tools of the state in order to weaken it. I've also used to be very socially conservative in my personal views, which I'm not really anymore. I mean, there are some limits, but I'm pretty libertine. I know I used to say it's their right, but I get to judge them. I'm going to say it's their life. Why should I judge them? Is now my kind of response. Becoming acquainted and friends with transgender people and other groups that have become more marginalized recently have helped me develop into that life view. It's also kind of led me to tone down some of my language. I'm going to still swear and shit. That is my prerogative, but I'm going to try and avoid pretty hurtful words like retarded, unless I'm using it in the legal or medical sense, midget, stuff like that. I was looking back through some of my older videos in preparation for this. I noticed I used to say it quite a lot. So I'm going to try and tone that down, because there's no reason to. There's a reason to curse, but not to use slurs, basically. So I'd like to talk about my life now. Like I said, I'm a university student. I do mock trial, preparing myself for law, but I also almost got arrested 3 times on St. Paddy's Day. What happened on St. Paddy's Day was, it's a major event at my school. Last year they called the riot police. And pretty much we have one street for partying. That's it. I go to a small school. And they blocked entrance to that street at one point, and that was the day we moved back in from spring break, so they were really trying to mitigate who could party. And this is public police having a checkpoint on a public sidewalk, because I tried to cross on the crosswalk to a sidewalk to get on that street. So I wasn't having it. For those of you who don't know, the Supreme Court has ruled that the free movement of people inside the sovereign borders of America is constitutional. You cannot set up arbitrary checkpoints in order to stop the free movement of people, and you cannot stop their movement if they have not yet committed a crime, which I had not. I had nothing to drink that day. I was trying to get to the party, not avoid it. So I initially crossed, and I get confronted by a cop who told me the street is closed, and I, bring him back to that point. He can't legally close the street. And eventually he agreed with me because he realized I was right and not to mess with me. So he asked me to submit to a field sobriety test, and I will tell you right now, if you are over the age of 18, you never have to submit to a field sobriety test. They can throw you in a drunk tank, but if you are sober or drunk, they cannot make you. So I refused, because he was being an asshole. So what happened was, I tried to cross the crosswalk again. Like I said, he stopped me, and I told him about the law. Then he asked me for the field sobriety test, and I refused. And since I refused, he decided to deem me intoxicated at the spot, which I argued he legally can't do. He can throw me in the drunk tank, but he cannot deem me intoxicated at the spot. So we go back and forth. Eventually, he calls over a cop car to try and intimidate me. And I realized that this was a losing fight. I hadn't yet recorded anything, so I decided to back off. I eventually cross over to the other side of the crosswalk where I was earlier, and I actually saw a different group of police officers from a different department, and I asked them what they thought of their peers' behavior, and they said that's why they don't affiliate with that department. They argued that they're very unprofessional and don't know what the hell they're doing. So I wait for the next shift of cops to arrive, because I've been told that'd be pretty soon, and they do. So I tried the same thing as an experiment. I don't record. I think the recording adds another variable to the experiment I don't want. So I get there, I go through the same motions, and this time they didn't call the cop car, but I leave. I was getting kind of pissed off. And this point, I decided that heckling the cops would be more fun than getting drunk. So I help people avoid this illegal checkpoint. And I do that. I tell them where it was before they get there, how to avoid it, which houses and which yards to go through. Obstructing justice, if you will. I guess that's become a theme in this last recent weeks. So I do that for a little bit, because I want to do my civic duty of messing with cops, which is a duty, by the way. And eventually the cops leave the entrance to the road, and I'm like, okay, let's go check out what's going on. And I hear some screaming coming from my house. And I go to investigate, and there are these girls screaming at a cop to, get out of their house. And he's on the last step into the house. And I ask him what he's doing. And he said about to go investigate what's going on. And I asked him if he had a warrant, and he said no. And I asked him if he had probable cause for a crime. He said no, but he talked about the yelling, and I had reminded him that the yelling was at him. You cannot create a situation in order to investigate something without a warrant. So he orders me to disperse from the area because the order to clear had been given. I argue that I'm not part of the crowd. I just stumbled over here and asked him what was going on, and he ordered me to again disperse. And I argue that you cannot disperse me from a crowd. And at this point, he was getting pissed, and he was getting real pissy with me. And he wouldn't leave, and he was about to enter the house again. So I asked him, are you here to sexually assault or rape these women? Again, I was still sober at this point, and these girls were obviously drunk. One had just puked. And so I knew I had to get him targeted on me and not on them. That set this cop off the edge. He didn't attack me, but he followed me out of that street, made sure I left the area, and as I was doing so, I reminded the girls to lock the door and not open it for a cop if they don't have a warrant. Demand to see the warrant first. They have to give you the warrant in a timely manner. They can't just wait until the search is over. So, I leave that street, obviously, as ordered to do so, because at this point I was worried I'd get aggressed against. And, I look, and try and see what's going on with that house. No cop bothered that house from what I could see for as long as I was there, so that's great. But just to give you guys an example of what was going on that day in the main area, people were shouting "fuck us up" at the cops. They knew the cops were going to crack down any minute, and they did. They brought out an LRAD. An LRAD is a crowd control device that uses sound waves to fuck you up. You can't block it with plugs or anything because it messes with stomach cavities. This thing really messes with people. It's not that good. People were throwing pepper bombs at the police. It was a nightmare. So again, don't start shit with the cops. If they start shit with you, don't be afraid to exercise your rights to mess with them back. That's just my life lesson to you. Also, don't get yourself shot. If you get yourself shot, you have less cops to mess with. So, that was that. Sorry, I'm kind of sick, but I wanted to do this when I have free time. It's college. I've also become an activist. I'm no longer just a keyboard warrior making a podcast for 20 views, 30 views max. I've embedded myself on a LP presidential campaign. Now, again, I will not name because of this shouldn't be affiliated with them. As a state director, basically I'll be handling and kind of managing all activities that campaign will take on in the state where I'm currently living in order to try and make it run more smoothly. I'll handle social media, events, planning, convention planning, stuff like that. I've gotten to go to Indiana's convention, a state near me. Got to see Jess Mears speak, the national member director, and I just like to say that the LP is growing significantly. We are the only of the three major parties in the United States, the ones that's growing registration numbers wise. We're growing our vote totals. We're getting the progress done. We will make liberty win eventually. That's what's keeping me going at this point. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about democratic participation as an ANCAP or an anarchist of any sort. I sometimes don't like to use the term ANCAP because capitalism has such a connotation nowadays that it is synonymous with American corporatism and European corporatism and socialism. That's not the case. The problem is that's what people believe. So I just like to describe myself as an anarchist. I believe that you can have voluntarily socialism at a small level, cooperatives, all that. That should not be excluded in the anarcho-capitalist system. So I just like to describe myself as a voluntarist. Most, if not all, human interactions should be voluntary. If if you wouldn't agree to it in a normal situation, why would you agree to a government doing it to you? That's just my opinion. But we live in a system. We can't deny that. We can't just wait for the system to collapse. We have to do something. If we wait for the system to collapse, we will be outnumbered, outgunned, and we will not survive. That's why we must create an orderly flow to chaos. And using the weapons of the state against the state itself is not inherently immoral. Yes, we vote on who will be our masters, but that is not the point. We vote on the masters that do us the least harm at the time in order to try and have no masters. Additionally, we can't just have the societal conglomerate without politicians and elections. We need who would have been an anarchist without rant? Okay. Out of everyone who's an anarchist now, maybe 10% of them were anarchists before Ron Paul. I think it's a fair assumption. Maybe 15 and 20, I don't know. He was a politician, was he not? So what we should do is we should rally around principled campaigns. Campaigns that run on principles, not pragmatism. And you can be a pragmatic, principled person. Don't get me wrong. But the campaign should revolve around the principles and take the progress that they achieve. I think Rothbard put it best in For a New Liberty, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't remember the exact quote, but he said, keep the flag held high for idealism and take what you get. And so I was watching Fox News about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, to the tax cuts, and they had on the head of the American Taxpayers Foundation, whatever it's called, and he said, I will take Trump's tax cuts, even though they're not good, and I will complain about them once they're done because they're not good enough. I think that's the way we should treat things, the way we should treat progress. We should always hold our goal in our head, but that should not stop us from making progress when we see fit, especially on voting initiatives. Most states are limiting the drug war's capacity, or even cities, by voting initiatives. Denver's decriminalizing Denver with psychedelics now. They're going to try to. Michigan legalized marijuana by voter initiative. Colorado did too, I believe. Politicians do not want to give you your rights. That if someone tells you they're here to give you rights, treat them like you would treat a trespasser. Because no government gives you your rights. You take them from the government that has taken it from you first. And that is why voter initiatives are important. Recently, my city I live in ramped up its war on prostitution, its war on whores, if you will. And shout out to Maggie McNeil for that term. It's the term for a new documentary about the war on prostitution. And I have not yet seen it, but judging by the knowledge that she's shared with me, she's highly intelligent, knows what she's talking about, and I'd go check it out. But they recently ramped that up, and I don't know if probably won't be this year. I've got too much on my plate, but I'd like to see it try and limited to its previous point by voter initiative. I live in a very conservative town, and maybe if I can get it to at least what it was before by voter initiative, maybe I can try and get it to lower limits. And I'm sorry, this is an abrupt pause. Someone came while I was recording, and I don't I don't know if there's a way to pause OBS recording, or I'm not really good at editing, so I decided to stop and make it 2 parts. But I was saying I got to teach at a Boy Scout camp. At this Boy Scout camp, there are 3 badges that are equal required called Citizenship and the Community Nation Enrolled. I taught all 3 at the same time, just whoever was there, I'd teach all 3 at the same time. It was pretty wild. I got some of the biggest crowds at the camp some weeks. At one point, I think I was teaching 60 kids at a time. It was a lot of fun. But while I was there, I got, especially Citizenship and Nation, I really enjoyed. I got to teach some different things. The book for that badge is very, very lacking So I decided to put my own spin on it. So I talked about Athens, Tennessee, where GIs fought for local sheriff by stealing guns from the county government and overthrew the county government because it was too corrupt to fix, and said that that is an American, that's your civic duty as someone who lives somewhere. I'm not even saying American because it is your duty to hold corrupt governments accountable to whatever you need. I also like to talk about Lysander Spooner. Everyone argued that voting is your civic duty, and I argued that is voting your civic duty. Sure, you can get a positive result from it, but if you vote for the wrong reasons for the wrong person, that's not a civic duty. That's a civic disservice. And it's actual violence. And I just brought that up. I just didn't say if I agreed with it or not. I said that, you're using violence to bring about your goals, so is that good? And I also taught that tax evasion is perfectly morally justifiable if you disagree with what your government is doing. If your government is committing mass murder in the Middle East and you avoid taxes for that reason, then that's a moral action. It's A, stealing money from you, and B, going to wrong things. So yes, it is moral. But I just wanted to briefly talk about why I was talking about defamation and libel. I didn't want to say where I go to school because the police that were harassing me were all detailed out to the university I go to. This is the same university that I called the president a criminal to his face in public before. My school president violated campaign finance or election laws, state and federal both. And because of that, since they violated it, I went to I took him to the public court. Basically, we had a forum on public safety, and there's a lot of students there because we don't like our university police that much. They're corrupt, they're violent, obviously, and they don't treat us with respect. So we don't treat them with it when they're doing stuff like that. So I went up to him with my Irvine for Ohio shirt, and at the time, I was a big fan of the Irvine campaign, and I asked him, big libertarian imagery, so even if he didn't know who Irvine was, he knew what party I represented for. And I took him to task over it, and, people don't like our school president, so it got me some good popularity. But the last message I want to leave you with is this: take human action. If the Libertarian Mises Caucus has taught us anything, it's to take human action. You can have principles, you can work inside the system, and if you're doing it for the right reasons and you do enough work, maybe you can bring about the change you need and the change you deserve. So, this is Local, signing off. You'll hear more from me soon enough. I wanted to say it's good to be back. It's good to have listeners again, and until next time, bye.